The meeting to order. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa, nā mai haere mai ki tēnei hui. Welcome everybody. It's both a full agenda and also a very business-like agenda. So hoping to get through. We've got a 2-hour time frame. So we've got a number of items to go through. Perhaps the more business as usual ones we will try to get through relatively quickly and concentrate on those most important at the end. I'll start with calling for apologies if there are any. I don't believe there are. Looking at the membership, go through any conflicts of interest. None identified. Matters under investigation. If we go to the table there, you'll note that the one is the reporting back on the regular reporting back on COVID and our risk registers, just noting that they were going to alternate each audit and risk meeting, and then the others are coming up in October and December and August. Chief Executive, David, straight into you, is it? Page 7.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everybody. And it gives me great pleasure to acknowledge and to welcome Annalisa Elstob as the independent member of the Audit and Risk Committee. Councillors will recall the presentation that I, the Chair and the Mayor made to you in committee at council meeting last time around, or last week, should I say, where we backgrounded the process that has led us to the appointment of Annalisa. So welcome, and I know that you're going to make a great contribution to the Audit and Risk Subcommittee. Mr. Chair, there is a recommendation on page 7 acknowledging Annalisa's appointment, and the second part of that is a slight amendment to the terms of reference. So if we go to page 9 and you have a look at paragraph 3, starts off, the number of members of the subcommittee shall be no less than 5, and it is the next sentence, which is the amendment, that the recommendation is for one member of the subcommittee shall be independently appointed for a term of up to 4 years. Happy to answer any questions on that paper, Mr. Chair.
There appear to be no questions. Can I have a mover? Moved, Mayor Broughton, and I'll second. Any further comment, discussion? All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Welcome, Annalisa. You're now officially a member, and I'll echo what the Chief Executive said. A very thorough process, and we were particularly taken with your interview and the skills and knowledge and background that you're going to bring to this subcommittee, and we look forward to working with you over the next 2 years of this, 2.5 years of this term, and forward into the future of the next triennium. So congratulations. Item 2 is the minutes of the previous meeting of the Audit and Risk Subcommittee on the 10th of June. Happy to move Mayor Broughton, seconded Councillor Mugford. Any discussion around those, or alterations or additions to those minutes? There being Jeff?
Yeah, though I'm not a member of this committee, you hear me all right now? I'm not a member of this committee, but I did mention last time that the independent member, and it says in the minutes here, and it's pretty well right, but it's not quite what I meant. And it says he added the independent member should be part of this list too. I agree with that, but I also said, and this is the most important thing as far as I'm concerned, that most fraud within an organisation like this is identified by people in the lower echelons of the organisation, and they're the very people that find it very hard to go to management and say, oh, one of my managers is doing this or that. It should be identified quite clearly that the independent member is the person that these people go to in the whistleblower situation. And I would like the minutes to reflect that, so that is clear throughout this organisation that the independent member is not just the person that has oversight over what we're doing, but also has that reassurance to staff at the lower levels of this organisation that their bosses aren't in fact defrauding the system.
Thank you, Jeff. David, do you wish to make a comment?
Just note those comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. That is so noted. All in favour of the minutes as presented? Against and carried. Verbal report. I've partially done that. But look, it's an important meeting for us. We've got here today also Julian Tan from Audit New Zealand and the interim report on our performance for the previous year. So we look forward to getting that report in due course, in fact, very shortly. There'll also be time in public excluded for the committee to have committee-only time with Julian and discuss and ask any questions that are arising out of that. Obviously, we've only had the interim report for a short period of time, and it will come forward to our next meeting for in-depth discussion. But it's an opportunity to engage with Julian, who's only been with us for this audit, this time in this time frame, and to perhaps build a relationship with Julian as well and get an understanding of how he operates and what the role is for those members who are new to the Audit and Risk Subcommittee. That said, we've got a number of items on the agenda today, the business continuity plan being chief amongst those in importance, and in light of the COVID situation worldwide, it's particularly pertinent. So it's good to see that we ran that exercise just prior to COVID, and some of the outcomes from that are contained upon some of the recommendations going forward. It'll be interesting to see how that frames our response in the future. So I'll move this verbal report. We've got a seconder, Councillor Reid. All in favour? Against? Carried. With that, Julian, would you like to come up perhaps up to the front and just give us information on the audit for this year, please?
Good morning, councillors. It's pretty early in the morning to tell you that possibly I'm presenting the low lights of this meeting. We have finished the interim audit. There's nothing spectacular to report back to the committee. The interim audit went very, very smoothly, despite the part of the interim audit being done or completed rather over the lockdown period. So we could say the interim audit went extremely well. We worked collaboratively with management. Some information were given to us through other means, and we were able to complete an audit for council. We have also finished the interim audit for council's major subsidiary, SciCon. And again, we were able to complete that part of the work through the lockdown period. So that's good news. Just in terms of our findings, there's nothing that is of great concern to the committee. There are some recommendations that have been outstanding though for 1 to 2 years, possibly even more, that I would like the committee to keep tab on, such that council puts resources into completing those recommendations. And in my view, they are not difficult recommendations to put through. Quite possibly just a small commitment of time. And Greg would agree. How should I put it? It's easy to implement. That's my view. We have some recommendations arising from sensitive expenditure review against the Auditor General's better practice guidelines. Those recommendations are still outstanding, and again, they're not big issues. There's some matters that require attention, such as polishing up the existing policy to capture the areas that are currently not covered in the policy. at the moment. The big part of our audit will in fact be when we come back for the final audit. There's a list of issues which we had indicated to Council in our audit plan back in March 2020. And those areas are around the valuation of your infrastructure assets. For example, one set of your valuation was done as at 1st July 2019. So for reporting purposes, there is that need to revisit the valuation to see if the assumptions that underpin that valuation might have changed, and I suspect they would have changed because of COVID-19 impacts. We also have, for end of year audit considerations, the resolution between Council's accounting policies and your financial statements versus your subsidiary, which is for profit entities. So you have in Council group a mixed group. So we foreshadow in our March audit plan that there will be that requirement to check and assess whether any of the items in SciCon's financial statements need to be relooked at to marry up with Council's public benefit entity reporting standards. So those are the items that we will work with management and get a handle on. I think that's principally my presentation for this morning.
Thank you, Julian. I'll just reiterate, we've got the opportunity at the end of this meeting for councillor only time with you, and if it's okay with the rest of the members of the committee, we'll defer any questions until that point of time. Obviously, this is an interim report at present, so we can have a more in-depth discussion at that point, and then when it comes forward to the next meeting, there may be questions and answers at that point. So thank you, Julian, and we look forward to catching up with you shortly.
Yeah, just to be clear, the report has been finalised, but it just didn't make it to the papers.
Yes, sorry, I should have clarified. It'll be on our next agenda for audit and risk for formal adoption. So thank you.
Thank you.
We now move on to item 5 on pages 20 to 90, with Chief Executive and Group Manager Corporate Services monthly managers report. David, if you'd like to kick that off for us, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The first item is further discussion on risk register amendments. So you have some pages attached to the agenda, pages 26 through 28, and the one that unfortunately was omitted from the paperwork that was circulated. So that's in front of you. Today you'll see where we have recategorised risk numbers 1, 2 and 4 particularly. Acknowledging that we've got very much moving targets at the moment, the discipline requires us to bring these back to the committee every second month, but happy to receive any comments on the risk register amendments at this point, Mr. Chair, and either I or Tim will attempt to answer those. If there are none,
I'll just quickly, I said to Tim prior to the meeting that perhaps just if he was prepared just to give us a quick rundown as to how those changes in rating numbers were achieved, to give us the overall score. If it's got just a brief explanation of that might be helpful to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as David has said, these risks are fairly fluid in terms of COVID as the pandemic progresses. Luckily, New Zealand is in a particularly good position, a bubble, and I think so, and probably more so than some other parts of the country. But in terms of the risks, there's been a number of downgrades basically because as time has moved on, the risks has dissipated to an extent, but still warrant keeping an eye on. Again, I suppose we've been through our annual plan process, and so some of the risks around the community engagement and reputational risks have been addressed through that process. And again, some of the risks around growth have not materialised as quickly as we might have thought in terms of growth numbers. Is still quite strong out there. So for that reason, it's been moved. That's number one. There's moved from catastrophic to major, and perhaps the likelihood of occurrence might even be further downgraded at the next report if the growth numbers return. Building consents are actually at a record high, believe it or not. Inspections for building consents are an all-time high, which is quite interesting. I suspect there will be a flattening off, but probably not as major as we had anticipated. So really, it's just as the risks, I guess, level off through the as time goes by, that reflects in some of the downgrading of the risks. But we'll keep monitoring those and report back on a monthly basis to this committee. But happy to take any further questions on any detail.
Thank you, Tim. Are there any further questions on the risk register?
As we've noted, Mr. Chair, that this is very much a moving feast, and one of the things that we found through the lockdown is often one of the biggest mistakes you can make is rushing to make a decision, because 24 hours later things will be something entirely different. I think you've only got to look at Australia at the moment and see what's happened in Victoria in the last 4 or 5 days. So I think the most important thing is that we have a good understanding of the risk drivers, Mr. Chair, and the committee has the discipline in place to receive an updated report every 2 months. Second item on the report is reference to the annual reporting, which Julian has alluded to in his verbal presentation, and I concur with the valuation process. I think is quite important this time around. The timeliness, obviously, of the audit is something that we will discuss further down the line, but again, we don't have too much insight into where that might be at the moment. Item number 3 is really put on the agenda for the information of the committee. It's a summary report of from the OAG into the 2019 audits and some of the lessons that were learned through there. And interestingly, over on page 23, I've just made reference to their subclause 4.27. And I'll read that. We consider that to be effective. Audit and risk committees need to have independent members. So again, I think congratulate the committee for the move it's made to appoint an independent member commencing from today's meeting. Item number 4 is...
David, can I, just make a comment on the insights into local government. It was interesting reading that paper to see the comments on OAG's comments on concerns of infrastructure investment. And I think that's particularly pointed when we think about our infrastructure spend. We often struggle to get projects delivered on time, but we certainly don't struggle to spend on infrastructure. I think it's one of the strengths of this council. And also interesting to note is the assets total of local government, 156 billion. We have a reasonable percentage of that assets here, and it's largely infrastructure. So it's just interesting to get those comparisons on a New Zealand-wide basis. So apologies, Chief Executive.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Item number 4 is for the information of the committee, and it's looking forward a wee bit just to let you know what we're doing Canterbury-wide in terms of our discipline for the 21 to 31 long-term planning process. So again, I've been asked by the Canterbury councils to chair a working party, which membership includes the 10 councils, Audit New Zealand, Office of the Auditor General, and Solgum. And midway through page 24, I've talked about some of the key reasons for doing that. It's around collaboration first and foremost, sharing ideas, making sure we're not duplicating. And this is making it easier on both sides, not only for the councils, but also for the audit directors as well, to make sure that we have this consistent national approach that we are taking. It assists us as organisations, probably not so much Selwyn, but some of the smaller councils who aren't as well resourced might still have to go through some more processes and give them the opportunity to borrow off ideas. Also allows us to present a sound platform upon which we can base our key assumptions, particularly around growth and the COVID-19 impact. And as I said before, that is altering very much on a day-to-day basis. Some of the key things that we need to remind ourselves of are firstly the Three Waters impact, as I've said to council on a previous occasion. central government will at some stage be making an announcement on the second largest asset group and therefore the second largest revenue group of assets for the local government sector. It is very, very difficult for us to get into any deep and meaningful LTP planning when we don't know the outcome to that. Secondly, the impact of climate change and how that may cross over. Impact of COVID-19, of course, again, is one of those things that we will work through. And the final one, which again we don't have an answer to, is the time frame for the LTP. Not so much the preparation process, but the audit process and the time frames that we will be operating to. From this council's perspective, it's really important that we pause and reflect on some of the issues that were raised by submitters through our annual planning process, just to make sure that we are actually hitting those from the right angle as we go forward over the next 10 years. But my personal view of the LTP 21 through 31 is it won't be the typical Manhattan from the land looking to the sea, where we're doing everything in the first few years and tapering off in the later years. For us, it will be very much from the sea looking towards Manhattan, focusing first and foremost on those projects that we have identified in our annual plan this year, making sure that we nail those, looking at the economic impacts across the district, and then taking our time to prudently plan for the construction of capital works going forward in 3, 4, 5 years' time. Item number 5.
David, a question there from Deborah.
Yes.
Councillor Hassan.
Thank you. Look, just with regards to the water reforms, I know there's a lot that we don't know, but is there any idea of what this government is actually looking at with its parameters? Because I now understand that they were looking at irrigation schemes, and some of those are private. They are not managed or under council control. They also were looking at managing water supplies, anything 2 and above, where it's supplied more than 2 households on the same property. And we have quite a few of those in our rural community, where you have one well servicing maybe 3 or 4 houses, especially on our farms. And also the other issue in the debate is the nitrate readings that some people are expressing concern about how we're going to manage those when they rise above the drinking water standard for some of our communities across New Zealand, because it's on a catchment basis issue. And while they're looking at stormwater, where does land drainage come into this picture with regards to its particular issues? And these are the unknowns, but it would be really, really good to have an understanding from this government. What exactly are you looking at? Because the parameters for me sitting here keep changing every week when someone comes along and lobbies them, especially in an election year.
So through you, Mr. Chair, let me start my response by agreeing with your last comment. It would be good to know. And that is what we're all striving to do at the moment. So literally every week where we have conversations, further topics are being added, and you've identified a number of them: nitrates, water races, and stormwater. Also, we know that there are a number of private schemes that are going to have to be brought into the mix as well. Identification of those private schemes and an understanding of their condition and the type of investment that's required. It's a day-long answer to come back to your question, but what I can tell you is that in the past week, a central government, local government working party has been formed. So I'll ask the Mayor, I think he knows when the date of the first meeting is, but that is scheduled. Well, he'll tell us the date in a moment, but the questions that you have asked are those that are also being presented by that group to try and get an answer. The smart money in the moment is that there will be no announcements pre-election. Obviously, we'll run out of time. It's down to about 80 days only between now and the election, and obviously less time to get anything in front of the House. Mr. Mayor, are you aware of the date of that first meeting?
Yeah, so there's sort of 3 parts to the question, Deborah. One is around the essential freshwater work stream, which was up for consultation early this year. The regional councils were heavily involved in letting the government know where, from a local government perspective, we needed to land, and that's where the one DIN number dropped out of the final presentations around dissolved inorganic nitrates. The second piece is around regulation for drinking water and the new drinking water regulator that's been set up. I understand their legislation is due to go through today, but they won't be set up, this week, but they won't be due to, and Bill Bayfield's SCE won't be due to actually take over as the regulator from the Ministry of Health through until next year. And so the Ministry of Health and CDHB is still a regulator in the interim. And the last piece is around the aggregation or proposed aggregation or optional aggregation of water supplies and the infrastructure that we have. And as the CEO has mentioned, there's the local government, central government working group on it. They have had maybe 3 meetings so far. They're meeting in person in Wellington on Mondays, I think it is, and we'll be having a report back to them. Hopefully Cabinet decides next week where they're at, and we will be having a report to a Zone 5 top of the South Island Mayors and CEs gathering on Friday next week. If that's the case, if there's been any decision made, we'll know next Friday where that's at, and they are hoping to have a decision this side of the election. Obviously, any decision at the moment, though, needs both the support of, needs the support of all the parties that are in government, and it'll be determined based on that. So I'll have more to report at the next meeting, but in the interim, there'll be something shared next Friday with councillors.
Sam, I'm assuming that will come to our full, through our normal council meeting rather than this. The chance for us to have input as an Audit and Risk Committee will obviously be once we know what's going to happen with those assets and how that affects business of this council financially and operationally. So we will certainly watch that with interest. So thank you.
Thank you. Next item on my report, Mr. Chair, item number 5, the council credit rating. To be honest, the adjectives can't describe this rating. Absolutely huge. We were blown away 12 months ago with a AA+, very proud, but acknowledging what's happening globally, and for us to go through this independent international assessment and still come out with AA+ is, as I say, adjectives really don't describe it. So, Mr. Chair, copy of the Fitch report is attached, pages 83 through 87 for everybody to have a read. And finally, in my report, I just want to acknowledge, if I may, Mr. Chair, the contribution that our group manager, Greg Bell, has made to council over the years. Greg is stepping down from this role. Today is his last official meeting, albeit Greg will be remaining with the organisation on a separate project August through July of next year, managing the compilation and adoption of our long-term plan. But I just want to acknowledge the immense contribution that Greg has made to the organisation over the years. His prudent financial management, which has helped us get to the position that we are in at the moment, and I think gives us that very solid foundation going forward. The sage advice that he has given to both councillors, to the management team, and certainly to myself and Greg, I really acknowledge the relationship that we have had. And it's a reflection of the very high esteem that Greg is held in by his peers, not only across the sector, but at council level as well. So just want to acknowledge on behalf Greg's contribution.
Thank you, David. And it's, I was thinking about, not wishing to steal your thunder at all, but I just concur with those statements. In the 4 years I've been around the table, I've increasingly grown to value Greg's input. And the understanding of the position that we find ourselves in now, and the previous item of the Fitch report, AA+ is in no small way attributable to that management that has occurred over that time period, and we are the fortunate, as a community, the fortunate beneficiaries of that prudent management. And we've always chipped you, Greg, on being conservative, but it is your role to be conservative and to feed back to us. It's our role to go and reach into the back pocket, I guess. But you've done that in a manner, from my perspective, certainly that relays the information to us well and gives us a view of the consequences. And I'm very thankful of that in my time around the council table. So I look forward to reading the book. Is it a book of poetry? What are we going to get, Greg. I look forward with some relish to being able to buy a tomb from your relaxed years away from this council. So thank you very much, Greg, and enjoy your well-earned. I think retirement's a wee bit premature, isn't it? Rest. Yes. Thank you. Okay, that gets us to the end of that report. If I can have a mover and a seconder on the motion that the Audit and Risk Subcommittee receives the monthly manager's report for information. Councillor Mugford and Councillor Reid, so moved. Any discussion? No further discussion. All in favour? Against and carried. Thank you. Pages 91 to 130 is management accountant Greg and Craig. Greg, your final swan song, but I can mention Craig's going to lead this off.
Okay. Morning. So if you just turn to page 92 of the report or the agenda, that's the sort of page I'll focus on today. So this report covers the period from 1st of July 2019 to 31st of May 2020. So that's the 11 months of the year to date. We've just finished the last month, and it's the first day of the new financial year today, actually. But this covers the first 11-month period. The overall message continues to be the same as previous months. The council was in a good financial position, and this is reflected in our AA+ credit rating that we've just talked about. The operational surplus is looking to be about $14 million for the year compared to a budget of $9 million. It's important to note that this surplus is required to fund the Council's capital expenditure program, including renewals of existing assets and construction of new assets. And then if we just look at line by line, I think in this page, so the subsidies from grants from operating expenditures over has a favourable variance of $200,000. This is slightly ahead of budget, largely due to a lottery grant that we've received to fund the Tiara Atea build. That was just not budgeted in this year, and we received that during the period. The fees and charges line is about $3.5 million favourable to budget. This is largely due to the environmental services area, which is seeing unprecedented sort of activity in this financial year today. The interest and dividends revenue line, I'll split that into two. So interest revenues ahead of budget, largely due to the high cash balances that we've held during the financial year. At 30th of June, which is yesterday, the council is still holding $75 million worth of cash investments. In terms of dividend revenue, we're also slightly ahead of budget with dividend revenue for the year. That's largely due to additional dividend received from Transwaste, and Cycon has indicated that the dividend for this year is going to be 1.5 million as opposed to the budgeted 800,000. I've noted this in the previous month that the Orion dividend is going to be delayed this year because they're going to declare that dividend after year end, so it won't actually be included in this year's results, although we'll probably receive that dividend sort of September. Just a signal that. In terms of payments to staff, we're underspent in payments to staff, largely due to staff vacancies. Payments to suppliers overspent due to maintenance costs, and mainly in the road maintenance area, and also the matching sort of costs associated with the building activity. And also there's about approximately $2.9 million worth of operational projects being carried forward into the next financial year.
So if I just drop down to the finance cost line, finance costs are lower, largely due to lower interest rates and also due to the timing of our capital expenditure program and the requirement to borrow. So borrowing levels are significantly lower than we had anticipated at this point in time. Development contributions revenue is also ahead of budget due to the high level of activity in the district. And as Tim's alluded to earlier, there's no sort of sign of that slowing yet. Gross sales are also ahead of budget. The gross sales relate to the sale of iZone land. That's just the timing of the sale. There's approximately $2 million worth of iZone land left to sell at this stage. Then also, if we move down to the capital lines, so that's capital growth, level of service and renewals lines, we're approximately $42 million behind budget to the 11-month period, but that's looking to be approximate over $100 million worth of carry forward projects for the full year. So yeah, overall the council is in a good financial position, continues to be. I'll just leave it there unless you want to go through or ask any questions.
I just wonder if we go through page by page, Craig, as we normally do, and if there's any questions there, just be aware I'm looking at the screen and I may miss you, so be vocal if we go through that. Page 93, so CapEx, expenditure income and OPEX, expenditure and income. Page 94, year-to-date totals, capital projects. Operational financial performance by activity. Page 95. 96, community centres funding impact statement. Recreation reserves funding impact statement. Libraries funding impact statement, page 98. Swimming pools, just a wee query there, I guess, or just a comment on that I see that we're below our target to date, but we've actually had our attendees are up, and just, yeah, perhaps a wee bit of a commentary perhaps next time, Craig, as to why we're not going to meet our dollar target when we've met our attendees target. Perhaps might be interesting. 100 township funding impact statement. Buildings and other funding impact statement, page 101. Community services funding impact statement. Environmental services funding impact statement, noting of course that we still have very strong activity in that area. Transportation funding impact statement. Obviously there's commentary there about our overspend, Craig. We're aware of that and continue to monitor it, obviously, to year's end, and there'll be a discussion, I should imagine, for coming years as to how we fund that. Solid waste management, page 105. Water supply impact statement. Just note that the complaints is above our target too. We're now 17.56 when we aim to be less than 15. So just we'll take a note that we keep an eye on that and see whether that's just a one anomaly or whether it continues to go forward. Wastewater 107. Stormwater funding impact statement 108. Water races land drainage 109. iZone. Internal council services. And major KPIs for major contracts. It's good to see that those are still tracking above our line, even with the impact of COVID. So that's we would have expected to have seen if there was going to be any reduction there. Certainly would have seen it over that period. So it's good to note that the quality of delivery is still up. Go through 113, the various other KPIs. Cash flow report. Craig, did you want to make any comment about the cash flow report? Obviously, it's been impacted by our need to borrow because of the deferment of those projects. Is there anything else you want to say on that?
I'll just add like the projected borrowings for the next financial year is looking for probably borrowing about 30 to 50 million, and that would be our sort of forecast borrowing levels.
Thank you. District plan review. Information there for consumption. We've got a DPR meeting coming up a couple of weeks, David. Is that correct? Yeah. a few more in a couple of weeks. Tim, did you want to add anything to that while you've got the opportunity?
Well, not really, Mr. Chair, other than that the district plan process is tracking well. There doesn't seem to be any significant headwinds at this stage. Looking forward to getting it notified into the Schedule 1 process.
Thank you. Yeah, obviously the COVID's caused a delay, as you say, and it'll be good to get that process up and away again. It's crucial to the forward direction of council and the community. 116, 117 LIMS totals. Obviously that's kicked back in again post-COVID. There was a dip. We go through to year-to-date totals as well, which is continuing along a similar trend to previous years. I'll skip to building consents. Comment I'll make there is it's good to see that strong performance still, and as I just said before in previous meeting with Chief Executive, I shudder to use the word bubble, but maybe we're in a bubble and that this is yet to burst, but at the moment it's good news, and it's certainly good news for the district, and it's good news for council as well. Yeah, Sam.
Yeah, can I ask Tim around the building consent processing days, particularly, like we're up at nearly 18 average. Have you got plans in place to ensure that it stays below 20? And we've been tracking sort of between 10 and 14, ever since the earthquakes, and actually managed the demand quite well. Obviously, as you've said, we're at the peak, all-time peak at the moment. What's in place just to make sure that we meet our timeframes?
It's a bit of a fine balance. Obviously, some projected staff increases were deferred because of the COVID situation, but then the actual drop-off in building consents hasn't materialised yet. We are relying on contractors and consultants, including staff from Christchurch City Council who have had a flattening off in application volume. So we're using external resources to make sure that we meet our timeframes. And we're still thinking there will be a drop-off, maybe not till September or October post-election, there may be a drop-off. But currently, just looking at the figures, Vanessa just sent through to me, record numbers in June, the highest building consent applications for nearly 2 years, which is quite unusual, and all-time highs for a number of building inspections. So keeping the CEO informed on a weekly basis, and Vanessa's is keeping me informed in terms of how we monitor our compliance with timeframes. But as I say, it's using consultants and contractors at this stage.
Thank you, Sam. That's a very timely question, actually. That's important to the delivery. So thank you. Resource consent stats, page 123. Resource consents issued, again, acknowledging the fact that that's beginning to climb back up again. And as a reverse to the previous question, I see the time to process has dropped away, which is good. Health and animal control stats, page 126, no questions. Compliance statistics. Obviously, that's been affected in the lockdown, I should imagine, Tim, to some degree, the ability to deal with the existing cases.
Yes, it was fairly seamless in terms of our response. Interesting enough, during the lockdown, there were a bit of a spike in some types of complaints around noise in particular. I suppose people at home were learning to live with each other in their neighbourhoods, so that created some challenges.
Very succinctly put, and yeah, I'll say you've been conservative in your answer, I should think. 128, service requests, action under legislation. 129, continuation of that. And Bob, sorry.
Murray, just going back on to 127, I noticed that Hororata has quite a large number of service requests. I wonder if when some of these get quite high, it would be interesting for us to know actually what they are. Because as I say, that if you look at all the small villages, they come up very small, but Hororata comes up quite large, and I don't know what those problems would be.
I'm happy to ask that we get a breakdown of that, Bob, to the next meeting if you wish that to happen. Yep. Can we do that?
Certainly, yeah, you're quite right. I can't give you an answer right now, but I'll endeavour to find out. And should I just circulate that on the papers, or do you want to report back at the next audit and risk, Chair?
I think just circulate. Are you happy with that, Bob? Yeah.
I'll do that by email then. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah.
Right. Just on that, I wonder whether we could have a bit of a process where if a township is overrepresented by 100% or 200% or a particular number based on its population for a particular complaint, whether we would just have that commentary in this report coming through, just as a matter of course.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion, actually, Sam. I'm thinking of a lot of things that could very well be that there's been a weather event or something that's triggered that, so it would be good to actually acknowledge that. So that's, Tim, that if that could be
noted. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, where were we? 130. We're through to subsidised rating forecast. So Sam again.
Just a question, I guess, around our use, and it's great to have Annalisa with us. Just thinking about our reporting and a review of what that looks like and how we might undertake, a bit of a look at that between now and the next meeting, using Annalisa's fresh eyes that have come on board and the expertise that you've got from outside our way of doing things. Just could be a chance for us to have a change, and whether there's a workshop opportunity, Murray, or just a conversation for you and Annalisa to have around some changes that we could put in place with the CEO.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, one of the discussions we had prior to the meeting with Chief Executive Annalisa and myself was around what value that I'm sure she will bring to this committee, and one of those is about questioning the business as usual approach that we have, and what you tend to do as a committee is continue to do what you've always done, and that is the strength that I'm sure Annalisa will bring to this committee is that outside view and that outside experience. So I'm more than happy to have those conversations. We might perhaps let her just find her feet a wee bit before we throw those things at her, but that's certainly the type of thing that I expect to be brought to this subcommittee. So yeah, good suggestion. Thank you.
I was going to just quickly respond to that. So probably by next meetings, it'll be a bit tough from but what I have found with board meetings and committee meetings is that, and sitting on both sides of the fence, right, is that you'll keep adding more and more and more to your reports. So it is good to have fresh eyes to go actually before you get to a stage where suddenly every month you're getting 200 pages, and then that gets 250 pages, that gets 300 pages. So making sure that you're focusing on the right things, and everyone will have a different view on that, but there's a lot of great work in here from management, so I kind of have not empathy for management, but I think there's a huge amount of work that they're delivering every month. There may be some opportunities just to stream.
Thank you. I should imagine that we continue to see an increase in comments from you, Annalisa, over time as you get comfortable with the role and comfortable with personalities around the room. And as I say, we're looking forward to that. Okay, we've reached the end of that report. We need a mover and seconder that the Audit and Risk Subcommittee receives the financial report for the period ending 31st May 2020 for information. Do I have a mover? Sam. Seconded Nicole. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Through to page 113, Group Manager Environmental and Regulatory. So this is probably the major focus of this meeting is the business continuity framework. So Tim, if you'd like to come forward, and huge body of work and a very good report, Tim, and look forward to just giving us a wee bit of a verbal. Obviously everyone will have read this in depth, I'm sure, and get a bit of a verbal update as to how you arrived at this, and anything that we've obviously noted and see what we've learned from the COVID-19 situation.
Ongoing work program that's been established to further develop the business response plan. And I should say that this is a living document. It's a bit of a cliche, but it is something that's going to evolve over time, and in particular in terms of some of the challenges that pandemics pose to our organisation and other organisations. So I'll make some further comments on that further down. The third recommendation notes further changes, as I said, will be made to the business response plan in respect of the learnings from COVID-19. And I'm suggesting in the fourth recommendation that there be a further report back on the progress of that work program in December of 2020. On reflection, committee members might like something back a bit before then, so quite open to that. So look, just walking through the report, the purpose is basically just to give an update on where we are with the business response plan, following the training workshops in particular, and also in just a bit of a heads up about where we are in terms of the response to the COVID-19 situation. Bit of history, obviously the business response plan had actually dropped out of the work that was being completed around the risk register, and there was a bit of a gap that was identified, and so we've developed a business response plan, and obviously that is to ensure that we are able to respond to disruptions to our services in face of some event, be it a fire or something like that. At the time that we were doing the business response plan and those actions around that, I don't think anyone contemplated a pandemic event. So anyway, the business response plan is to ensure staff safety and welfare foremost, and secondly, to make sure that our essential services in particular are maintained, and that we recover from interruptions as quickly as possible, that staff have a clear understanding of their roles, and the stress and disruption to staff is minimised and customers, and that there's a sufficient level of resources. We developed the response plan, a draft document, which I think you've seen some time ago. It was a while ago, actually, for various reasons. We didn't have the training sessions until about March. And just as we were undertaking the training sessions, there was 2 workshops for key staff in the business continuity response teams. The pandemic started to emerge and gather momentum. And so we just finished the exercise, and the exercise was one where there was a fire, scenario where there was a fire actually in the headquarters here, and we were unable to work from the headquarters for, I think, a couple of weeks. And the report is attached as an appendix to this report. And so we went through an exercise of what would we do in that situation, how would we deal with our staff, how would we make sure that our essential services were able to be rolled out. So that worked really well. We had a number of learnings, and those recommendations are also attached to this document. And I guess some of the key ones, we initially had 2 documents. It was a wee bit clunky, so we combined them into one document, which is the business continuity plan. One other big learning that we had was that we probably need to think about further temporary locations for our response team to operate from. So that needs to be thought through, and there's a couple of options. There's some options around in the future the health hub, and there's other council facilities we may be able to use, and also Burnham Burnham military camp, in terms of a relationship there, could be something we could explore further. So there are a number of recommendations that dropped around in the training exercise that are going to be ongoing. A few have been implemented, but that's why I think we need to update it later on in the year. All of that was quickly overtaken by COVID-19, and all of a sudden we were faced with putting our business continuity, business response plan, teams into action, which was only days after the exercise actually finished. So it was actually quite a fast learning curve. And on reflection, I think we were pretty lucky to have had our exercise only a week or 2 before we actually initiated a real life scenario in terms of response. And so we put them together. Obviously, though, the response to the pandemic was quite different from those we've been planning for. Most of the scenarios we were thinking about were not long-term events where there were significant outages, not only for our organisation, but for everyone. So that posed some real challenges. And as I say in the report, we quickly decided that we needed 2 teams alternating on a weekly basis to respond to the issue. And then We then realised we needed to move 400 staff off-site in a hurry, and to realise that this may actually last for some time, weeks, months. As it turned out, it was only about 6 weeks in terms of not returning to these headquarters. But it was a real set of challenges. So I've just tried to capture some of the key themes there in terms of the challenges that the lockdown posed to council. These are still settling out, if you like, and still evolving. And I think it's changed the way we will work forever. But so obviously challenges to council's information technology. We needed to get kit at home pretty quickly. And we did probably have a bit of shortage of laptops and second screens, mobile phones, some real learnings there. And I think a lot of those will be picked up in some of our operational strategy work we're doing, and in particular, the digital strategy, David, that we're looking at kicking off maybe later this year or early next year. One of the other big challenges was connecting staff working from alternative locations. And that was a challenge. We started off using Skype and then came across Zoom, and now it's part of our everyday language. I had never heard of Zoom until just before we went into lockdown, but it's been a fantastic tool and something that we use, well, I use on a daily basis now, and suspect that a lot of people will continue to do so over the coming months and years. The other thing, which I think was a good thing, there's been really some positive things that have come out of the COVID in terms of how we respond as a council, is in terms of our focus on council's well-being, understanding of who's essential in terms of getting staff doing, getting our essential services rolling out, keeping them rolling out. Just a general understanding of our vulnerable staff and the well-being of staff became a priority. And again, it's emphasised there. I apologise there, I've got ability of staff to access from home. That's a typo, obviously. I don't know how that slipped through, but it did. Yeah, and again, the challenges of working from home is a real sort of core for our future business response. And we've been through this now. We've been able to do it. I think everyone was pleasantly surprised about how successfully it went. So I think in light of those, there will need to be further refinements of the business continuity plan. And so I've got further exercises, which is part of the recommendation. And I think some further exercises around, let's hope not, but it's probably not completely impossible that there may be future pandemics and things of that nature we need to think about carefully. So look, that's a bit of just a stroll through my report. There's appendices there in terms of the amended business response plan and the recommendations that came from the learning exercise. And as I say, there's got to be an ongoing work program of how we work as an organisation, and a lot of that will do with disruptions and how we can work differently together in a new way of working. So 3 options there in front of you, committee members. And happy to take questions or comments. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. As I said in the opening, it's a very thorough report, and look, thrown into it at the last minute, literally, to get that response. And I think one of the strengths that this council showed was the ability to actually think on their feet. And whilst not everything, I'm sure, was perfect, it was pretty damn good. From that, what you do learn is that you never plan for the thing that you're going to get next. And that's the difficulty, of course. And as you said, you plan for a certain situation, but the one that hits us is actually radically different than we would ever have thought of. A number of things. You've stolen my thunder. I was going to have a crack at you on the stuff and the stuff thing. So you've got in before me, Tim. So I missed out on that one. But I guess some of the things noting from what I've read there is just perhaps a need to have more devices available at home, and you've commented on that to some depth, and again here today, is that the whole way that we operate here as an organisation may well change, and the need for increased staff accommodation in our pods may be offset by the work to home thing, so that it's perhaps a chance for us to look completely differently at our work environment. The other thing is, you've touched on again, was that reporting back time frame. And I personally would like to see something. We're still in a worldwide pandemic, so perhaps December might be just leaving it a wee bit long. and I know that's putting pressure on you from a work frame, but even if it was an interim response back, some of those learnings that we've taken, obviously in your report, to further develop, to bring that forward to us and just say where are we at now in the process, even if that's the process at this stage, Tim. We've talked in there also about alternatives for getting jobs done. We've listed Cyclone and Living Earth, etc. if we have particular areas of contact. But what that brings in for us really is, do we have that relationship agreement with those companies? Obviously, Cyclone's a lot easier, but it then also asks us, how strategic is Cyclone as a CCO to this organisation? And I think it's a conversation that we perhaps need to re-engage in. We did that several years ago, Sam, and I just wonder, perhaps not necessarily just at Audit and Risk, but as a group, we need to have that discussion. How strategic is Cyclone to this business continuity framework plan for us, especially from an infrastructure perspective? So those are my comments. Any other questions around the table for Tim before we put the motions? Deborah.
Look, thanks for this comprehensive report. Where we actually deal with other organisations outside our own organisation, I just pick one, payroll, banks, etc. How reliable are we on understanding their business plan fitting into our business plan? Do they have one? Do we actually need to look at working with those outside agencies that our organisation is dependent on to see how their business continuity plan is going to affect ours?
Yeah, that's a good question. And Greg or others, maybe you have to comment, but I don't know if we do have that relationship or understanding. Greg, have you got any comment about it? I think Deborah's asking about our understanding of other organisations, banks, for our payroll, how they work under a disruption like a pandemic, for instance, and would our better relationship or understanding of their processes help us?
Yeah, we did work with Cyclone a little bit in relation to changing our payroll system recently, although we've not ended up on the same system. We do have a clear alternative plan. If we have problems with payroll, we can run the previous payroll file, and that's a simple way. If we did have a particular crisis on payday, that we could run the previous pay file and run that. So we do have arrangements in place, and I have to say that the working at home arrangement for the payroll team went really smoothly. We put in extra checks and balances so that we could verify the payroll remotely. So we actually changed our processes a little bit to deal with that.
I think the question is a very pertinent one, Deborah, because that's kind of what I was getting at with our dual relationships, that we understand that we haven't just named these people in our business continuity plan, but we actually have a relationship with them that we have developed, and that there is an understanding both ways that we're self-reliant or inter-reliant, I should say, with each organisation. And whilst we do have MOUs, as you said, with the Ministry of Defence through at Burnham, have we actually sat down and said, this is how we would like to operate if we did? And I think that's the further development that perhaps is necessary in this plan, Tim. So just as a guide going forward. So further work I think is perhaps necessary to establish those. And as I said, the Cyclone relationship is the easy one to do because we have that direct link, but understanding their IT systems as well, are they compatible with us? Can we operate from there if we had an issue with over the road, those types of things? I'm sure they're on the radar, but just reiterate that. Sorry, I didn't see who was next on the list. It is Annalisa.
I went to Kapai Mahi. It's a great piece of work. I have spent a few years writing crisis management plans, emergency response plans, and business continuity plans, and they are hard work. And every time you think you've finished it, someone else has got another. So my question is quite high level, and it's around scope, because I've always felt that getting the detail right on how many devices we need, and it's very important, but actually it's making sure we really understand the scope. And I think that's fairly clearly defined in the beginning when it says all BAU activity. So my question related to, I guess, And you've also made note that emergencies are out of scope. So it's that difference between, when I've written these documents, I've actually done it separately. So I've had a emergency response plan, a crisis management plan, and a business continuity plan. Because if you have the worst case scenario, black swan event, you could find that one starts, then the next, and then the next. And actually the people that are involved in the emergency cannot be the same people that are involved in crisis. And actually, if you've got all the resource in the world, all the money in the world, you would have those three separate teams. But my question, I guess, relates to is around major projects. So if we have a major touchwood, but a fatality on site that's got a head contractor that has control of that site, do we have an understanding of what our role is? They have control of that site, but if it's on our land and it's our project, it's our emergency. Is that in scope for a crisis? And I guess it also comes to the question that you alluded to, that where I've worked on major projects, it's in that pre-contracting phase where you'll actually, in the procurement, you'll be asking them for their emergency response plan, right? You go, well, there's your emergency response plan. Here's our emergency response plan. Because actually, I'm sure David, as Chief Executive, and Mr. Chairman will want to have some kind of oversight or involvement. Even if they have control of site, you want to make sure the relationship is good enough and strong enough that when it's our land and our project, and that's all done in pre-contracting procurement phase. So, rabbiting on, but I guess it's around that scope. So I think we've been very clear in this document on what this scope is, but is there another document? Is it covered in the emergency response plan, I guess?
Yeah, that is a really good question. It's one thing that I have struggled with in terms of what this business continuity response plan is actually designed for. And we quickly realised in terms of the pandemic that it really wasn't fit for purpose for all the different things coming at us. And so we developed a pandemic response team. Response plan. And I'd imagine, so to answer your question, I don't think this plan addresses the issues that you've raised in terms of that, and you're quite right. There probably is another piece of work that might need to be thought out. I would imagine through the procurement process, and quite happy to take comments from Murray, that there will be some consideration of those issues. But and again, you're quite right. There's so many different components to this. It's very difficult to know what you don't know. But I think to answer your question, no, this business response plan I don't think covers that situation. Should it? I'm not sure. I don't think so. I think that's a separate piece of work.
It doesn't need to. I mean, you've been very clear and said that it's BAU activities.
Yeah.
We've defined that. So it might just be that it does not, this plan does not cover emergencies for major projects, but we just need to make sure that that's covered somewhere else.
So there's civil defence emergencies. It doesn't cover that. It's under the CDEM type of framework. But this is something that's probably another, and it's probably dealt through the procurement process. Murray or Douglas, you got any comments?
I think we just confirm that obviously when you're at that start of a procurement of a major project, yes, you go through the health and safety and what would happen as a major event. But you're right, Tim, we also have civil defence plans. Murray and I are controllers in that area. We have adverse events plan, and we did actually implement our sole lone worker plan last week due to an event. So there are a bevy of plans. I think what would be useful if we work with Tim though, just to get those all scoped into some sort of table or
some sort of diagram might be useful,
yeah,
in terms of how,
just so we're all clear which one we're using when type thing. But you're right, we are lucky we've got enough depth. And during the pandemic, we had a number of scenarios planned and mapped, even from a civil defence perspective and from a council perspective. So, but you just got to keep working on that because you just can't rest on your laurels.
And I think sorry, just one last thing. You can have all the detail in the world, but what I have found from running these mock scenarios is that the most important thing that needs to be clear is roles and responsibilities. So, the detail underneath is important, but when we're having that conversation with our head contractor, they understand their role because they control the site, but we understand what our role is because we probably want to have some kind of role. And that's not hard, that's not a huge piece of work. So, Kapai is great.
Could I just add to that, Tim? I think that's an area that we could probably look to plug in terms of respect of what happens, even with the best will in the contractor who actually manages the site, and we have a fatality, and it's happened in a number of councils around New Zealand where, particularly with curbside work, where someone has been had a fatality, and it always comes back to the council to have to provide some input into that. So, and that's a lot of that's around the reputational risk and the like. So, look, I think that's a gap that we should look to fill.
If I just make one comment, if you, I know you've all would have thoroughly read the plans, but if you go back in particular, the areas that Tim's got there on 146 and 147 about event response, it's a really good summary of the key issues that we drag out to consider when we're setting up, because the key thing is getting a structure in place and knowing who's taking the lead on issues. And those 2 pages in particular are useful just having on your wall if you're ever in an event. So, yeah.
Sophie.
Sorry, I know I'm not a member of the committee, but I just thought I'd ask a quick question. I noticed it's an awesome plan. I've been involved in smaller scale ones before, but yeah, flexibility is often the bit that you really need because you never quite know what life's going to throw at you. But I just noticed in there, this is probably just because this is where I've come from in life. I noticed you've got roles for business response admin support, but there are none listed as the participants of your exercises. And that could just be because they did their job so well that all the maps and the whiteboards and all the resources and the minutes came through so beautifully that nobody really noticed. But it's I can guarantee in a real response, if you haven't got your admins knowing exactly what they need to do and where to be, you'll notice.
You know, we did have administration staff, obviously, and they played a key role. So you're saying that they haven't been noted in here? Well, that's an omission that I'm surprised someone hasn't brought to my attention before now. So yeah, I'll make sure that that's addressed. Thank you.
There was a participants list, and it was, yeah.
Okay, no, thank you. I'll have a look at that.
Mr. Chair, I just want to start by complimenting Tim on the work that's gone into this plan. It's just a huge amount of work. It has been prepared, though, with the possibility of returning to lockdown, and unpalatable as that may be, just look at what's happening in Victoria over the past 4 or 5 days. There is a reality that was there. We were very well prepared when we went into this exercise 3 months ago, and that is due to the experience that would accumulated in the review of processes over the past 6 or 7 years. But it's fair to say that we learned a lot during the exercise, and internally at the moment we're going through a survey which really focuses on what it was that you learned, the new way of doing business, not only with each other but also outward facing as well. I think it's easy though to forget what we were able to achieve without too much effort or too many changes in practices through the lockdown period. Payroll, we never skipped a beat. Creditor payment, we never skipped a beat. Collection of revenue, and also customer support, where we were able to answer incoming phone calls and emails from our customer services staff who were actually at their home. And Tim's also referred to the digital strategy, which of course is the big learning out of it and the big investment. So very comprehensive report, but the bottom line is that again, it is fluid, and we will continue to review this and continue to take learnings on board.
Thank you. I think we'll call an end to the discussion there. We've had some good discussion, Tim, and I think there's some good guidance as to where we see things going forward. And I've just taken the liberty of having Naomi add at the end with an interim report to be presented in September 2020. So that can be progress towards that again. It's a doubling up of the timeframe, but I think in light of where we currently sit worldwide and potentially, a matter of weeks away anywhere in the country, things could change radically. So I think it could form part of our ongoing discussion. So A, B, C and an altered D are up. If I can have a mover for that, please, Sam and Deborah. Any further discussion? If not, all in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, Tim. Huge body of work, as has already been said, and extremely well presented. Thank you. Final item on the non-PX on the open meeting is projects accountant, so major projects, financial and contract performance report. Unfortunately, Craig Robinson is ill today, so Douglas, I think, are you fronting this for us?
I'll do the property
You'll do
bits
your
and
very
I
best,
will
page
defer to
253,
Mr Washington on the other pieces. So,
Yes,
yeah.
thank you.
So if we basically just go through project by project, so indoor court facility, it's going well. That project, there is the rain over the last few days, obviously. As you have to allow for these sort of things, but it's obviously reasonably steady rain. Although to be fair, we're probably all pleased it's rain actually because we need that moisture. So indoor courts. Any questions on indoor courts? What we're saying? Okay, Selwyn Aquatic Centre. One of the risks that Craig regularly identifies, as he should, is the risk of contractor or subcontractor performance under COVID. And we've been advised this morning of a reasonably minor contractor at SAC where we now have a problem, but the alternate subcontractors are acceptable to us. So lead contractor Armitage have worked quickly to resolve that issue. So that's a good test that Armitage are on top of that job. So revision there. I just want to highlight there on page 239. We will continually look to see how we can move the opening of the different areas. You know, if we can open them a bit quicker, we will. But we are, I suppose, fair to say, taking a reasonably conservative view there. I think the point from my perspective is that the maintenance work undertaken during closure has gone really well, and it was great. Actually, we took that opportunity with COVID to get in and do that work. The other project that's, as you know, the fittings and the ceiling, you actually wouldn't know that work was underway. I know it's done at night and it's tucked away, but it's really discreet. And as you know, I spent a wee bit of time down the pool, but it's very discreet and being done really well. So that's got no impact on operations in effect. So although I am told the odd bolt is found in the bottom of the pool, I suppose that's minor in the scheme of things, and of course they're working outside of work hours, so it's not a risk issue to swimmers. Anything on the Selwyn Aquatic Centre?
Yeah, Douglas, it was the question that I raised with Craig was around that contractor insolvency, and I guess the question was not whether it was specific just to SAC, but it's actually specific to any of our contracts, really, and I just wanted to clarify that point with him, which he confirmed. So that's something we're looking at all projects, not necessarily just SACs. Mark, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. Just a request that I know we're closing the centre for a full day on the 13th for doing some electrical work. Just that's better advertised as present. It's quite possible that it will slip beneath the nose of regular attendees, and they will be suitably annoyed if they front up on the 13th and find the centre is closed for a day. So I'm just pleading that we make sure that that's as well advertised as it can be, because it's a disruption to the routine that may not be expected by regular users. I've advised one user group, a disabled group, who would be visiting the pool on that day, that the centre will be shut. If we make it as clear as possible, as much as possible, to avoid, I appreciate that we're doing a great job of minimising the disruptions to users, but when they are, we need to make sure that we signal as far as in advance as we can.
Can you put your microphone on?
I've got a mark. So Tiara Tier. I mean, one really good thing is standing in front of that building, as I'm sure you've all done by now and having a look, and also seeing the quality of the Upper Park roadworks out in front of that. It's also pretty cool watching JP Singh's building coming along on the other side. That's sites all going on in terms of Tiara Tier. Anything on Tiara Tier particularly? Okay. So in relation to Tennyson Street, and you're well aware of reporting we've done inside of Public Street on the detail there. We haven't noted it in this report because it is a provisioning. And I might just comment in Public Street where we are with that particular issue to give you a little bit more detail. But just so we're clear, that number of 678,243 is that sort is clearly the maximum sort. We don't believe that's anywhere near what is the appropriate payment, but we don't discuss that more at this time. Any questions on Tennyson Street?
Oh,
I sent an email through questions yesterday, but Douglas has raised that some issues that he's going to do in public excluded, and that's appropriate where my ones that he talked about then too.
yeah, I think the nature of that, I think we'll do that in VX as part of the Chief Executive's report. Thank you, Nicole. Mark.
Yeah, I was questioning the time frame around those to resolve that issue about the claim. The other thing I was just noting that as of this morning, we hadn't managed to achieve two-way traffic through Tennyson Street. I presume that's as soon as we can with the provision for the wonderful weather we're having.
Yeah, I don't want to comment further on the provisioning issue. I'll talk about that. But the opening of Tennyson Street full length was always programmed for sort of in that third week of July. We'll be back a wee bit because of the weather, but we should be through there by the end of July. And then the rest of those items there, the town centre, the retail, that's they're just really holding patterns at this present time, which I appreciate. So we'll move to Murray.
If you if you have a recovery card, you'll see the outline how the project is going. We're at the stage now where the weather will play a large part in terms of completion over winter, particularly with the asphalting. But at least you can see a lot of the curvings and it's starting to look like what the future will look like. With the Lowe's Road Tennyson Street intersection, again, we're at a stage which is fairly dictated by the weather. The weather of the last 2 weeks has delayed the asphalting work, which was scheduled to take place over the weekends. We're still looking at the end of July, but I suspect that given the weather we may be into early August. Lincoln Reservoir, if you don't know where the site of the new Lincoln Reservoir is, it is behind the New World on Vernon Drive. It is above ground now. It's taken a wee bit of time to get there, but progress is starting. Pines Solar Drying Hall, still in the design and design review phase. So the actual construction stage is not actually intended to take place for the next few months. But at the same time, we are just working through the procurement of the design for the new clarifier, which is the next phase. And as you're aware, we're also doing our forward planning in respect to future capacities of the Pines to handle somewhere up to 120,000 people equivalent. So you'll never finish the Pines. You're always in a process of either investigation, design or construction. So, thank you.
Health Hub. So you've all looked at it as you came in the gate this morning. So it's bang on program at the moment. No real great issues. We've had 2 meetings this week, or was it 1 meeting this week, and a second meeting planned for tomorrow. The reason why they're important is they're part of the Markham Way, Rolleston Drive, Dryden intersection project, and obviously they link into the Health Hub project in terms of some services, some roading, but also car parking for contractors. So we've got our project managers, I know on both actually, who are side by side over those issues, and we had a discussion yesterday involving our road safety schools coordinator and the plan that we'll take to Rolleston Primary to explain how that wider footprint of construction, and we will work children safely to and from school. So,
Deborah.
Thanks. Look, just with regards to the Pines and the upgrade for the Pines, given that it is our major sewage infrastructure for the district, And given that we are being faced with a reform of Three Waters, has anyone done an analysis on how much investment we actually need to put into our construction to manage the population that we've got versus our future population, given that if this is handed over, at what rate of capacity should we be prepared to hand it over to the Three Waters group, so we have not overcapitalised or overinvested in this, in the upgrade of the pines? And that goes, I guess, for a lot of our infrastructure. Has any analysis been done?
Well, you will recall that there's a request by council of me to undertake that capacity. It's one of my KPIs.
If you don't mind, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to comment that through our long-term planning process, we have 3 or 4 months to basically provide the bones of our long-term plan. And in the discussion with Greg, who's obviously managing that process, we have to carry on as business as usual. We cannot second guess where Three Waters or Two Waters review might get to, what can be in and what can be out, because it's an ongoing investment. We're always meeting growth. We just have to continue to plan as if nothing changes. And that may not be the reality, but it's just we're always just in time in terms of delivering updates, so that is a valid point.
Thank you, gentlemen. We've reached the end of that report. I'll move from the chair that the Major Projects Financial and Contracts Performance Report to 31st May 2020 be received for information. Seconded Councillor Reid. No further discussion. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. And that brings us to the end of the public meeting. I have a resolution to move into PX. Deborah and Sam, all in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. So we'll just take a short break. Does anyone want to quickly refresh their coffees or something while we have a short break, toilet stop or whatever?